get to Bob Thomas. Bob Thomas in the fight for his life right now, trying to hang on against Paul Milde. Bob Thomas, the incumbent in the Fredericksburg House race. He defeated Milde in the last primary by a couple hundred votes. He also defeated his general election opponent by a couple hundred votes. So Bob Thomas, no stranger to very razor-thin elections, and Paul Milde is running a very spirited race against him. This is going to be very, very close. Bob Thomas, good to have you with us, man.
Good morning, John. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Article, Washington Post, I think it was Friday, not very positive about your opponent, Paul Milde, saying that he was involved in a robbery of a shoe store, tried to cut a hole in the roof, and I guess he pleaded out or something. I don't remember it, but it was not particularly helpful to your opponent, Paul Milde. Is that something that you're now making a campaign issue about?
Well, the problem with that is for the last 14 years, when Paul first ran for Board of Supervisors, he was asked about that. And he always explained it that he had a buddy in Narcotics Anonymous that he was mentoring, and this guy told him about the robbery, and because he wouldn't cooperate with the authorities, he was charged with accessory after the fact and actually convicted of that in a plea. The Washington Post, just a couple of days, uncovered some court documents that show not only is that a complete lie, but he was actually at the scene of the crime. There was testimony by his fiancée at the time that described it in very plain detail, and they got a hold of the prosecutor from back then who gave a quote to the Washington Post that said that, him not being involved in the burglary explanation was, quote, utter nonsense and a complete lie. So I think, everybody around here has been believing that one story for about 14 years, and it's quite miraculous that he just assumed that because they had a plea bargain and everything was sealed up that he would be able to tell that lie and get away with it. So the local newspaper haven't done a lot with it because they felt like they reported on it before, and I think they really kind of missed the whole point is that, this is an elected official and we're held to a higher standard, and he's been misleading, our constituents for quite a while. So we've made a little bit of an issue on it, but to be honest with you, it kind of surprised us as well because we didn't do that level of oppo research. And that's really what concerns us about November. If we put Mr. Milde forward as the nominee, what else are they going to find when they really start looking? And, the Democrats spend $50,000 on a private investigator to look into this guy's history. And they'll do that most absolutely come November.
So, Bob Thomas, let me get this straight. I know that both of us believe in redemption. People make mistakes in their life and they deserve second chances. I'm a big believer in that. I know that you are also. And I think what you're criticizing here, Bob, as I understand it, is not what Paul Milde did, but the fact that he tried to cover it up for all this time and that he was not honest about it. And what you're saying is if he had just said, hey, here's what I did. It's in the past. I did my time. I'm sorry for that. I've paid my dues, but, now I'm rehabilitated and I've gone on a different path. I think people, respond to that kind of thing. I mean, they get it. People make mistakes in life. But I think what you're saying is that he had covered this up for a long time and didn't really own up to it. Is that my understanding of your take on it?
Yeah, that's exactly right, John. As recently as last week when the local newspaper printed the questionnaires from the candidates, one of the standard questions is always a little bit about your criminal history. And we never understood why he kept leaving off the robbery. He likes to talk about the cocaine with intent to distribute because he was really young when that happened. He was 18. But this robbery happened when he was almost 30 years old, certainly a responsible adult. And he continues to leave that off, and now we understand why. He's kind of trying to keep that under the radar because he knows in his heart that he's misleading everyone. So it really is about that misleading and what else are you hiding kind of question. We have to be held to a higher standard, especially in big league politics. Running for the Board of Supervisors and these things come up, it's not such a big deal. But, we're talking about the General Assembly and control of the House of Delegates, for the next 10 years.
Listen, Bob, we've got this as a razor-thin race. Paul Milde has spent a lot of money. The last time I went through Fredericksburg the other day on another piece of business, I saw signs all over the place. Obviously, they've got an operation going. How does Bob Thomas tomorrow win this race?
Well, this race has been going on for well over a year. My opponent's raised about $12,000, and he spent out of his own pocket $465,000. So because he's able to bankroll his campaign, I think that's why you're seeing a lot of those visible signs of somebody who has money. But, for the last year and almost year and a half, we've been out talking to my constituents. Even last year in, quote, a non-campaign year, we knocked on thousands of doors. And I'm one of those candidates who loves talking to my voters at the doors and, we're just sharing our positive record. The fact that, my opponent is such a misleader has really come through in the campaign itself. There's three main issues. It's fair game to, criticize my votes. That's part of this process. It doesn't bother me that we're in a primary. That's how this works. We need to find the best person. But, John, last year when we did the Medicaid expansion, what that's now being twisted into, because people around here kind of understand that these are working Virginians that couldn't afford their insurance. He's now telling people, and I'm hearing this at the door, that I could have, as a state legislator, repealed Obamacare. So I have people asking me why I didn't repeal Obamacare in its entirety. And he's running on a campaign that he's going to do that when he gets to the General Assembly. And you and I both know that that is absolutely impossible. But that's the lengths that we're going through now on the other side to confuse people. Even the LARC funding that was in the budget last year, which provides contraception to women who are using abortions as their form of birth control, which is absolutely horrible. That's now being told to the constituents that Bob Thomas is building abortion clinics with state funding. So that's the level of mistruth that they're going to on the other side. And, I'm having those conversations at the doors. And when people see the budget language for themselves, I ask them to read it, and they come away understanding that they're being misled. Everything we've done on our side of the campaign has been nothing but truth, and we're just focused on our positive record. And we have a massive team on the ground today, less than 24 hours away. And it's really about getting everybody out that has an ID for us that said they're going to come vote. So if we get them all to the polls, we should be okay.
We're with Bob Thomas. He is a House of Delegates member, Republican, representing the 28th District. That's part of Stafford and Fredericksburg. He's being challenged for the Republican nomination by Paul Milde. It's a very close race. Milde spent a lot of money, but he's got some issues that have come up. There was an article in the Washington Post just the other day talking about his attempted robbery. I think it was a Foot Locker store when he was 30 years old. That was under wraps for a while. Now it's out. He'll have to deal with that. But, Bob, look, I thought your vote on Medicaid expansion, I was for it. I thought it was a courageous vote. But look, it's politics, right? I mean, your opponents are the opponents of all of those that are being challenged in a primary that voted for Medicaid expansion. The way they term it is an expansion of Obamacare, which it was not. It had conservative reforms in it, and I was certainly for it. I was against it, and then I was for it because it stopped making sense to be opposed to it when all the other red states were getting the money and Virginia was not. And the people that benefited, 85% of them voted for Trump in 2016. The whole thing didn't make any sense to me. That's why I was for it. But look, you took a courageous vote, and it's not going to be easy. You have to defend it. I mean, Emmett Hanger's going through the same thing, even though I've endorsed Tina Freitas for a whole other set of reasons than Medicare expansion. But, Bob, look, you've done a good job there. You've shown great leadership. I don't know how you do it because this is going to be, you're going to have gone through 4 races in a 2-year period, all within 250 votes or so. That's not easy to do, Bob. I mean, that's tough. So I gotta hand it there to you. You got a day and a half. How do you win this race?
Well, like I said, we have the right strategy. 2 years ago, we actually had a 3-way primary. I ran against Paul Milde and Susan Stimson. There's about 6,000 people that showed up, so we kind of know what the primary universe is. I had almost 50% in that race. I had 3,000. So I beat Mr. Milde by about 1,000 votes last time. So we're just making sure to shore up our base here in the southern end of the county where I represented it on the Board of Supervisors for 6 years. My home precinct, I won by 69% in a 3-way. So now that we don't have the third person in there, we're just focused on making some gains up in the northern end of the county where my opponent has represented several years on the Board of Supervisors. So It looks like a lot of those Stimson votes are actually coming our way, which kind of surprised us in the beginning. But I guess if you look at it 2 years ago, if they were, Milde was on the ballot and he was their supervisor, if they didn't vote for him then, there was probably something that they didn't like about him. So we've made our case to those voters, and we just got to get them to the polls. Has
Susan Stimson made an endorsement?
She has not. I'm sure Mr. Milde is begging her not to do that. There's all sorts of issues there. But if you look at the campaign that he's running against me versus the one that she ran against Speaker Hall 4 years ago, it's the same mail vendors, it's the same messaging, it's the same cartoon characters, and really just not serious kind of attacks. So she has her fingerprints all over this race.
Look, the John Fredericks Show's endorsed Bob Thomas in this race, so we're going to get all that out on the table. We did a robocall for you, and if you're in the 28th District, we encourage you to vote for Bob Thomas. Doesn't matter that you agree with them on everything. I don't agree with them on everything. I don't agree with a lot of the candidates I back on everything. I'm not a purist. It doesn't matter. This is stuff we got to stop here. We got to stop the litmus test, 18 questions. Oh, they failed, 2 of 18. I'm not for them. You know what? It's a big tent, and here's the bottom line. Thomas can win. Milde will lose. If Thomas doesn't win this race and Paul Milde wins, he is going to lose to a Democrat. He's not going to win. That puts Speaker Cox's gavel in jeopardy. And if you want to turn the state over to a caucus of the corn and Eileen and people like Lee Carter, hashtag Commie Lee of the CCCP, if you want to turn it over to Kathy Tran and all these other nutbags running around, if that's what you want, then stay home or vote for Milde because you're mad about Medicaid expansion or something else. If you want to do the right thing and you want to keep the General Assembly in the hands of the Republicans and Kirk Cox's leadership, and you're in the 28th district, stakes are high. Bob Thomas is the guy. Bob, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, John. Couldn't say it better myself.
That's why I'm here. John Fredericks Radio Network, Trucking the Truth.